Hey friends, I'm so excited that you're here and I'm excited to share with you some personal things about myself as well as helping hopefully you guide through a self-love discovery for yourself or maybe finding love in other places as we kind of dive into the whole relationships. And so I wanted to start out with sharing my own story, but then also give you some really practical tips and things you can use in your everyday life to help move forward in your own relationship. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so let me start by sharing my own personal story. So if you know me personally or through social media, you will know that I married my kindergarten sweetheart. It sounds really weird. It was not staged. It was not like, back in the medieval times where there was planned marriages. It was really just a small town that I grew up in. And I had about 22 people to choose from in my graduating class, and I found one, and he was amazing, and he is amazing, and I absolutely love him. He is my favorite person in the whole wide world. So what does that mean? What does that look like? And how did we get here? So I want to start by saying that it was never always like the way it is now. So we first met in kindergarten. He was 4, I was 4. He's actually like 12 days older than me, which is just kind of silly anyway. But we both were like the shortest people in class and we were tiny. And to be completely honest, I didn't really see him. Again, I was 4 years old. It was not like I was like love at first sight. First sight, it was really more like, okay, he's there, and there's all these other things I wanted to do. We also dated in seventh grade. He was on the basketball team and I was a cheerleader, and it just didn't work out. He was extremely hairy, and that was not my thing. Again, at seventh grade, we don't really know what we want out of life or what we want in a partner, but I knew it wasn't a body full of hair. And so here we are. Did you see what I did there? Here we are. Okay, I'm sorry. I will try to stop doing that. But so we kind of grew apart at that point. I went my own ways, my wild ways, and he kind of had his own like vibe where he was doing like archery and he always wore a watch. And I just thought he was kind of weird, and not in like a bad weird, but just like wasn't my person. So I didn't really pay attention to him like at all. And then I dated several people, and again, I always would find one thing about those people that I'm like, that's something's wrong. Like, I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it. Whether it was the way they moved their mouth, or like the body language they would carry, or the energy they would bring into the room, or maybe it was something physical that I was like really unattracted to, like the way their ears were shaped. I know it sounds weird, but I'm just here to kind of explain to you kind of how we came to be. So I, again, was constantly exploring, trying to find my person. And I was always infatuated with boys. It was just a thing. We say boy crazy all the time. Yeah, that was me, 100%. So, about 17 years old, Jesse, my husband, and I, who's now my husband, we're actually out at a party. Because when you live in a small town and you live in a country town, you don't really have a lot to do. So, you kind of create your own fun, which meant that we would go to the country and find a bridge, and we would like do all the things that you shouldn't do as 17-year-olds. And so that's where I refound my now husband. So we were in the bridge, and again, I won't go into the details because it's kind of, you know, not G-rated, and we'll just kind of keep it a little mild here. But anyway, he caught my attention. I'll just say that. He caught my attention. I'll share the story another day. And so in that moment, I kind of was like, okay, so I think he's interested in me. Am I interested in him? I don't know. Kind of stood back, observed. We ended up enjoying time together, having fun together, going out together. And I think I was like, you know what? I think I can have a relationship with this person. So we dived into that, and then it really just kind of escalated very quickly. Um, we ended up being pregnant at 4 months into our relationship, which I know is extremely early. And I am not in any way advocating for teen pregnancy or teen parenting or doing any of that kind of things. But again, when you're bored, you find things to do. I will just leave it at that. It was boring in our small town. So 4 months into the relationship, we were expecting our first child. We both were still seniors in high school. And so what that meant was that we had to go through and navigate me getting up early as I didn't get to sleep in. I also was horrible about mornings, and I couldn't get up, get out of bed. I was starving, all these things. So I remember throwing frozen grapes into the freezer because I had home ec, my first class of the day, and I would eat those. Like the teacher would let me eat because it would get really nauseous. It was horrible. But we just kind of grew together. We started navigating that. And I, again, do not want to sugarcoat things and make it sound like it was perfect and everything went great. It was not good. I remember at one point in our relationship, I actually was carrying a marble book bag on my back full of my clothes, my belongings, walking home to my parents' house about 8 months pregnant because it was so irritated. You guys, relationships are so challenging, especially when you don't know who you are as a person or who you want to be. And that was exactly where I was in my life. I just was putting one foot in front of the other, and I literally couldn't see my feet anymore because my stomach was so big. I had gained like 70 pounds. I didn't recognize myself. I didn't even know who I was before I got pregnant. And so being pregnant and having all those hormones, it was crazy. But you know what? He never gave up on me. When I wanted to leave, even though he knew he was being an ass and I was also being an ass, he never wanted to give up on me. So huge kudos to if you're in a relationship and you both don't want to give up on each other, do the work to navigate to get to where you want to be. And you both have to do the work individually and together. And fortunately, the way we navigated things and made it work ended up wonderfully for us. And again, I don't want to sugarcoat things because I know you look at my social media now, you're like, oh my gosh, she's obsessed with her husband, whatever. They probably don't even talk to each other. That's not the case. We literally are best friends. And I think sometimes that's kind of how it plays out. So for you, if this is something that you are struggling with in a relationship and you're not sure how to get to the next level or you're not sure how to navigate, I 1000% want you to focus on yourself first. So before we can show up for anyone else, we have to show up for ourselves. If you've ever heard the analogy when you're on a plane, before you even give an oxygen mask to your child that is sitting next to you, you have to put it on yourself first. Perfect example in a relationship as well. You have to know what you want out of a relationship and also know like the downsides that you have if you are struggling with showing up. So I knew sometimes I would be a total bitch and it was not nice. I did not like who I was in that moment, but I was irritated and frustrated. I didn't know how to navigate my feelings. I had horrible emotional regulation. I would yell, I would slam doors. And yet this man still showed up because he still was invested. And I was invested, but I didn't know how to be invested. So back to the love story, which we'll get into more of like being invested and how to show up in relationships later in future episodes. But for today, again, we're going to go back to the love story because that's where the meat is. And that's where it brings me so much joy and is so grounding for me. So again, we were pregnant at 17. We had our first child. Both of us were 18. It was right before Thanksgiving, and we were new parents navigating. We had no idea what we were navigating. We were just trying to figure out how to keep this child alive and how to not break up. And I was horrible at it. He was way better at it than I was. I don't know why, but my MO was always to be like, all right, if we're in one fight, we might as well just give up. Like, this is dumb. We should just stop doing this. And that is not how you should be in any relationship. So again, we were one foot in front of the other. I was on WIC, welfare. We didn't have any money. We were both, I mean, I couldn't work, I was working retail. So of course I couldn't work for a few months after having my child. Retail paid shit. I was making like $8.25 an hour. It was horrible. You cannot survive off of that. So of course we needed public assistance, and that's what we lent to. That's what it's there for, is to help support you in a time of need. And that is exactly what we needed. So throughout all of that, while we were having challenges or we were frustrated with each other because we had no money or we didn't have enough spaghetti in the counter or the cabinet, we were still grounded in the fact that we genuinely loved each other. We loved each other's company. We had fun together. And that was kind of always our guiding light in every situation, is that we really enjoyed when we were together, we were really, really together. And we set up these kind of ground rules for each other, and they kind of organically evolved into what I say today is kind of like our guiding principles for our relationship, which I will share in a future podcast. I want to get into that right here because it's totally a whole other topic. But I just want to share with you, if you're struggling with a relationship, think about what you want to get. This is going back to your own principles, your own values, and what do you want out of the relationship. So again, we finally were able to get off of welfare. We were finally able to move out of our trailer. We were continuing to grow, and then we had another child. So 4.5 years after our first baby, our second son was born, and we were just, again, living day by day, no, it was never like I never had enough in my bank account. It was always, do we have enough to make it to the next time? It was just a lot of stress. There was a lot of financial stress, but again, we grounded in the principles that we really loved each other and we had a lot of fun together in all the ways that you could think of. So, in thinking about that, think about, again, those guiding things for yourself and what grounds you in a relationship. What are those values that you want to bring into the space? For me, I totally encourage you to do the love language quiz, which I will link for you below. That was really helpful for me to understand what I needed out of a relationship and how I needed to show up for the other person. So it's just something to throw in there as well. So again, we kind of evolved, we grew, we are 22 years into our relationship. We actually ended up getting married about 8.5 years into our dating relationship, which is like extremely long. Like I was over it. I'm like, I would always have ultimatums like, if you don't do this, I'm leaving, blah, blah, blah. If you don't marry me, why don't you want to marry me? And of course, guys' mentality is if it's not broke, don't fix it. I will never say if you don't have to buy the cow if the milk's free. I don't like to be considered as a cow in any way, shape, or form. So if you think about it again, if it's a guy's mentality, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And for him, he was like, it's not broke. Like nothing's broken in our relationship. Why do we need to get married? Why do we need to change that? And I'm like, I want your last name. I can't do anything financially because we don't have tied accounts or anything at all. Like it was always a struggle. So all the reasons too. I'm like, if you want to be committed to me for the rest of your life, why do you have to wait? And so it was always a struggle, and that was like some tension, some back and forth. It finally happened Christmas Day. He got down on one knee in the stairwell, and it was very sweet and very personal for the both of us. And we had a great wedding and a great reception, a great honeymoon. We just had a lot of fun. And what we found in that space was we really enjoyed being together without our kids. And I 1000% recommend you going out with your spouse, dating your spouse if you have children. I think it's the one thing that grounded me in when the kids got older and things got crazy and schedules got hectic. Another huge thing, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but anytime I felt tension in our marriage or tension in our relationship, or I felt frustrated with him, I knew it was time for us to go out on a date night. It happened often, I will not lie. But I'm saying that as what a weird way. Like most of the time when you're frustrated with someone, you just want to get the fuck away from them. Like you don't want to talk to them. You're like, get away from me. I need my space. I forced myself to do the opposite. And I forced us to go out, whether we'd go bowling or we would just go out to eat or we would just do something without our children. Sometimes it even looked like going to the grocery store, which I still do not like going to the grocery store with my husband because I just like to you know, take my time. And he's like, again, in and out. They're like very efficient people. I'm like, I want to browse and I don't know what I need until Target tells me what I need. So, but seriously, thinking about that, like going back to that principle, going back to that idea, it's just something to consider and keep in mind. So that's a really great takeaway for you to write down too. Whenever you're feeling frustrated in your relationship, what is it that you need to do to show up better and differently? And sometimes that might mean putting yourself right in front of them, smack dab in front of them, having a date night, going out to eat, whatever it is, doing something together away from the kids so you can take away that variable that sometimes makes the environment a little more stressful. And that was a perfect resolution for us. And we always came away feeling better and happier and more re-energized in our relationship. So again, we had gotten married, all the things were great. All the things are still great and they have evolved over the years. So probably about 5 years ago or so, I would say that things really started to shift. And I do think for us personally, again, this is not for everyone, but I do think for us, it really came down to our parenting, and our kids were older, they were more self-sufficient. So I'm speaking to the people who have kids who are over the age of 10. Again, we can talk about navigating relationships when you have kids who are younger, but I'm speaking to the change and when the shift happened. You also have to be really mindful that my husband and we didn't talk about having kids. Again, we unexpectedly got pregnant both times. And so we didn't ever prepare for that. We never really even had a conversation about having children. And so, now in retrospect, I ask him often, I'm like, did you ever want kids or anything? He's like, no, I never thought about it. And not that he wouldn't have gotten to that point, but as we have evolved and grown together, I 1000% see like we would have been amazing parents if we would have had kids now in our 30s. Not that we were bad parents, but we were in such a learning phase of our lives, being in your late teens and early 20s, that, I think we weren't able to provide the patient parenting that we would to date. So we actually have a dog now who's about 9 months old, and we are like amazing dog parents. And I'm always joking like we would be the best parents now. So again, I'm no way trying to persuade you to have kids or choose dogs or whatever, or, again, you have to do what works for you. This is just kind of how the universe threw out our deck of cards, and this is how it all played out. So we obviously had two children. Again, after the age of 10, that's when things started to shift for us. So when our youngest was 10, our oldest was about 14, 15, things really did start to shift in terms of they were more self-sufficient. We found that we were able to do things more often. So whether it was we could actually go out really quickly, run a quick errand without the kids. So again, this is just what worked for us. Some parents and people, I 1000% get that you might just really enjoy spending time with your kids. But when I've had conversations specifically with moms, we have this guilt that we put out there, which is, I think it's a toxic kind of a situation that we put ourselves in. As a mom, we expect ourselves to show up as the parent in every situation. Again, maybe your husband is super hands-on. I will be completely honest, mine was not. He was not like, oh, give me the baby, I'm gonna go change the baby. That I did everything. And we talk about that now, but I did so much in our marriage, and I did so much before our marriage, and so much after our marriage, and so much with the kids. I felt almost resentful in certain situations, and I really do think that sometimes that can really ruin a relationship. So depending on what you need, again, this is something we can dig into on one-on-one coaching, or we can just have some conversations about it. Please feel free to DM me. It's just thinking about, what do you need every day out of your life? What does that look like for you? Because for me, I was exhausted raising kids. I was not that good at it. I'm just going to be completely honest. My mom, who is like the most maternal, sweet person, was amazing at it. And yes, I had maternal instincts, but I never got that time to develop and grow my own self. I was very immature. I didn't know who I wanted to be. And so I was always struggling, like navigating parenthood and being an organized mom. Like that was the biggest downfall I had. Like my kids, we were always scrambling out the door to get them to school. It was always like, why don't you know what you're wearing today? Like I was horribly disorganized in parenting. And it really bled into our relationship, because I wasn't frustrated with the relationship with my husband. I was frustrated with how I was showing up as a mom. So that was trickling into all of those things. And so when my boys got older and were more self-sufficient, I was able to like slow things down and organize and prioritize my brain and put systems in place. And it was a huge game changer. And now that I have one child out of the house and one who is going into his senior year of high school, it is like completely different. So I want to say this to you, as if you are not sure, like what if you're struggling in your relationship, I want you to really like sit back and analyze, look at the big picture of everything. Do you feel organized? Do you feel like you're valued in the relationship? Do you feel like you're doing a good job? And if you don't, let's talk about that a little bit, because I bet you're doing way better than you think you are. Parenting is the biggest and most challenging thing. And they have What to Expect When You're Expecting. That's a great book, but it doesn't talk about when your kids are assholes and you have to navigate moms reaching out to you. It's like because your kids are being little shitheads. Like it is so hard, so emotionally dysregulating. And that is why I ground myself in the relationship I have with my husband, especially now. We still have parenting struggles, even with a child out of the house. There should have been a book for that as well. What to expect when your kid moves out of your house, because I thought it was like, oh, they're 18 and you're done. You don't really have to have these challenges. It's harder now sometimes than it was when he lived at home. So in thinking about that and thinking about what can be helpful for you in listening to this podcast, which thank you very much for showing up today and listening, I will tell you all of the woo-woo stuff that I feel when I think about my husband today. So I tell him all the time, some of the biggest things I do is I tell him I love you every single day, because I do. I tell him probably 800 times a day, because I just want him to know how much I value and appreciate him. That's another really important thing. When your spouse shows up make sure you acknowledge that. I think a lot of times, and what I've heard from a lot of specifically women, because that's who I talk to most, is they're more, when you hear like nitpicking, think about how many times you nitpick versus how many times you say thank you. My husband, again, didn't ever really do chores around the home. Again, it was kind of like our tradition. He does the outside chores and I do the inside chores. Well, you know what sucks when you live in the Midwest? The outside chores end about November and don't pick up again until about March, April. So the household chores are throughout the whole time. And that can really suck sometimes when your spouse is sitting on the couch and you're in the kitchen doing the dishes, exhausted over cooking dinner. So my husband did the dishes the other night after we cooked meals. We had some pizzas together. We made homemade pizzas, and he cleaned up the kitchen. And I was like, "Thank you so much." Like I didn't want to sound disingenuous, but I'm like, I really appreciate when you do this. This is so helpful for me. Like I have had to do dishes since I was 5 and could stand on a chair. I don't want to do them anymore. And so again, make sure you are praising the good things. The other thing my husband started doing a couple of years ago was making the bed. I was never a bed maker, and I know there's a whole book about it. I just never really understood why. I totally get it now, but I still don't want to make the fucking bed. So he started making the bed. It is not good. I'm not going to say it's like military style bed making. It is half-assed, but you know what? I appreciate the shit out of that. And I tell him that. I send him a text every time I see it, almost every time. I'm like, "Thank you for making the bed today. I love you." Like it is such a simple thing that took me about 3 seconds out of my day. Well, you can even say, "Hey Siri, text my husband, tell him thank you so much for making the bed today." Simple stuff like that. I need to make sure that doesn't actually go through because I already actually I made the bed today because I'm off work. So again, making sure you're not showing up as nitpicking and bitching all the time and making sure that you're praising them, because what I found is it is a ripple effect. Who doesn't like to be told thank you for doing a good job or thank you for showing up differently today? I really appreciate it. Like if you think about that for yourself and how you would feel if someone was to project that onto you, or if your spouse or your husband was like, "Babe, thank you for doing the dishes today." You'd be like, "Yeah, I freaking know. I've been doing them for 27 years. You're just now saying thank you." No, we're not talking about that. We're talking specifically about flipping that around. Again, whatever your roles are in your household, they might be different, but I'm just telling you to show up differently in a relationship. Even if it is something outside, maybe that's his household chore is to mow the grass, you know? Like, "Hey, you did a really good job. That grass looks awesome. Like, you should work on a golf course or something." But I just say, like, praise goes so far. The other thing is, and this is tied into all this, is communication. You guys, every time I hear of a marriage or a relationship going south, many, many times it is, I feel like, a lack of communication. And this is something I worked really hard on. It could just be because I'm outspoken, but I worked really hard to show up in the relationship to say how I was feeling. The whole "it's fine, I'm fine." No, we have to stop doing that. It's not doing ourselves any good. We're just internalizing that. And it's like this horrible hamster wheel of toxic frustration. And what I've heard and what I've found is that resentment ruins relationships. So if you're getting frustrated because you don't know how to speak to your partner when you're pissed off, or maybe you're frustrated because they didn't show up the way you wanted them to in the bedroom, or maybe they didn't pick the kids up for school when they said they were going to and they ended up going out with the guys or something, have the fucking conversation with them and show up and say, "I don't like you the way you made me feel." What I would always do in those situations is not like be like, you. It was more, "I don't like how you made me feel and how I feel in that situation." I would also do something different that was, I've also talked to a couple other people about, is really flipping it around and said, "How would you feel if you had told me, if I had told you that I was going to pick up the kids tonight and then I totally backed out and you ended up having to go get them and I knew you were busy? How would you feel if this was flipped around?" That is the biggest thing that has been a key in my relationship with many people. I have used this in coworkers' relationship, my marriage, with my children. How would you feel if I said exactly what you just said to me back to you? How would that make you feel? It really flips it around and makes the person put themselves in your shoes, but it's in a way of like, you need to respect me more. Like I need you to show up with respect to our relationship. and you don't get to treat me like this. And so that has been a huge guiding thing for me as well. And I don't have to do it often, but I do it. And I have done it in the past. I was like, I didn't like the way I felt when this happened. Can you please ask me in a different way? It sounds really stupid, but communication, again, I feel like is the foundation of a relationship. If you can have good communication skills back and forth, you are going to go so far. It is not easy either. My husband is a fucking brick wall. He's like a stone wall. He stonewalls me all the time. I just have learned that that is a very normal reaction to things. And he doesn't know how to process his feelings. And that's okay. That's what I'm here to help him do. And he has come so far. And it's just, I joke, this is so inappropriate. So I know I'm probably going to get some haters about this, but I've joked to him before. I'm like, is this what lesbians feel like in their relationship? Because I literally feel like I have a best friend. It's just in a man. And I always just assumed that if you're in a relationship with another female, that you feel like you guys are best friends and that you get to have sex together. Very similar, and I feel like in my marriage, it's my best friend, and we get to have so much fun together and build a life together. And so I don't want to spoil anymore. I will leave it with that you can have a no, okay, we're gonna stop that right here. We're gonna put that to bed. Okay, let's actually go to another tip, okay? Because now I feel like I'm gonna get so many haters and I'm gonna get canceled before I even get started. So the other thing I've mentioned already is quality time together. Again, this is whenever you're feeling frustrated, it's time to take a pause and go out on a date night. If you don't have very much money, split a meal. You don't need to eat all the foods. That's what we do all the time. It is our date night hack, which is we go out and we get fajitas and we split it. We still have leftovers we bring home because it's so much food and you can eat for like $25. So I'm not saying go eat unhealthy all the time. I'm just saying go do something or go bowling or go somewhere, go to the zoo, go on a walk, go do whatever brings you joy in your relationship. And it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. Also, again, the mutual respect and support. This is kind of what I was talking about when I would bring into the space, like, this is how I felt when you did this. Can we show up differently for each other? And flipping the script around of like, how would you feel if I did that to you? I know it sounds kind of tricky and complicated, but I'm happy to help you navigate that if you are struggling with how to ask or how to bring that up. It is not easy to bring up something that's going to make someone else feel different or uncomfortable, but what happens if you don't say anything? Resentment ruins relationships. For me, I found that I was starting to resent things within the relationship, and I didn't want that. So, conflict resolution skills. Again, communication. It's the foundation of literally every successful relationship. Communication, over communication. I will tell you I love you 1,000 times a day. If you get sick of it, I'm sorry. That's on you. Okay. And then the next one is maintaining individual identities. I do think this is important. And as I mentioned, my husband and we didn't really know who we were. He probably knew who he was because he's a guy, and I feel like they're always like, oh, I got this. I'm a hunter. He did all those things. He had hobbies. I had nothing. All I knew was I wanted to be a mom one day. Well, I had that, and I didn't even know how to navigate that. So now I've learned how to figure out who I want to be, and I did a lot of self-discovery work on finding out what I enjoyed, what I didn't enjoy, and kind of navigating life through that. And so I found my own individual identity that is actually separate from my husband. He is welcome to join me. It's in my fitness community, which he has joined me just the last couple of years. But for me, I've spent the last 10 years actually building that identity. So I really think it's important to build your own identity. All right, I will leave you with this. When you can do all of these things, I promise you the relationship you have with your partner will change for the better. I literally have a best friend who lives with me. We do almost everything together, and it's never like annoying. I'm almost like nauseous thinking about how like obsessed I am with our relationship. I know that sounds weird, but I'm just trying to tell you, like, it feels so good. And when something bad happens, whether our kids are being assholes or something bad at work happens and I'm have a stressful day, I am always grounded in our relationship. It is like my rock that brings me back to peace and joy. And I want that for you. I want you to be able to find something or someone that can bring you that kind of safe space, that comfortable, nurturing feeling that he brings to me, because it is I hope it goes both ways. Actually, I know it goes both ways because I've asked him, especially when he's drinking. I ask him those really targeted questions, not to bait him, but because I know he's going to give me an honest answer, which I'll talk more about too, because he gave me a really interesting answer the other day. But I just want to tell you that it is absolutely amazing and it feels amazing to be loved and to love someone. It is like literally, you know how you hear the butterflies in your stomach? It is like that every single day. I know it sounds cheesy and I know it sounds weird. And I know you're like, I've been through so many toxic relationships. I don't know if this is possible. I 1000% believe it is possible. But you have to work on yourself first. That is one of the biggest things. Communication, finding out who you are, who you need to be, and then having those hard conversations so that you don't have that resentment ruin your relationship. So I hope this was helpful for you today. If this was really great, make sure you share this with a friend. Make sure you subscribe. I would love, love, love to hear your feedback as well. You all have no idea how much I appreciate your outreach, whether you have like, oh, hey, this was kind of a weird thing that you said, or like, oh, I love this. Like, I love feedback. It helps me grow and show up better for you. And that's what I'm here to do. And I really genuinely want every single woman on this earth to feel like she knows who she is, feel solid, feel confident, and feel that love that they can have with someone else because it is literally amazing. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Again, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.